give her presentation, and we'll have questions following at the end. Feel free to use the chat box to ask any questions during the presentation. If you have any questions, you can type them in there. I'll go ahead and ask Liz these questions at the end of the presentation so we can get all the way through. We did receive multiple questions from folks during registration for the event. I will be asking those questions if they're not already covered within the presentation by Liz. And lastly, I just want to share with folks, we ask that you remain respectful to all participants in this conversation tonight. We do all care very deeply about this river and about the Deschutes as a whole in the basin. And so we're all here to be advocates for a better river. And we ask that everyone be very respectful to participants as well as our presenter tonight and staff. If we do have any disruptions, I'm going to either mute or ask people to go ahead and leave, and I can go ahead and ask them to leave the room. So with that being said, I wanted to go ahead and introduce our presenter for tonight. Dr. Liz Perkin is the Northern Oregon coordinator here at Native Fish Society. Prior to joining NFS, she worked as an environmental consultant, monitoring native trout populations and their habitats and running water quality programs in Alberta. She has also been a visiting professor researching the effects of climate, changing light, temperature, and flow regimes on stream insects and fish. Liz earned her PhD at Free University of Berlin, researching the effects of light pollution on stream ecosystems. Her master's at the University of Washington, studying the connection between river processes and riparian tree growth, and her master's at Reed College, where she wrote her senior thesis on stream macroinvertebrate response to addition of hatchery salmon carcasses in the Sandy and Clackamas basins. So with all that introduction being done, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Liz and to get us started tonight.
Thanks so much, Kirk. It's so great to see so many people here caring so deeply about a river that we all love. So I'm going to start off by figuring out how to advance my screen. There it is, down at the bottom. I'm going to start off by setting us up with a sense of place. I'm going to be spending a fair amount of time talking about water quality, a little bit talking about aquatic invertebrates, then spend a fair amount of time talking about steelhead populations, and kind of lay out a path forward and how we kind of envision some things to help the basin as we move into the future. So to start with a sense of place, like Kirk mentioned, we all care so much about this watershed. This is a picture of me catching my very first trout on a fly in the Upper Deschutes River at Foley's, if people are familiar with that location. My uncle is there helping me out, and my brother Andy's there too. And this is a really cherished memory for me, and I'm sure that everyone on this call has so many memories similar to this one themselves. And it's part of why we all get so emotional and care so much about the river. I'm gonna try to keep very fact-based and just the data tonight, but I know that this is a really meaningful place for all of us. So with that, I want to again kind of put us in this larger basin, right? So obviously the west side tributaries are very different than the east side tributaries. This is a basin that has faced increasing pressures from humans in recent times. We tend to focus a lot on the Pelton dams, but there's a lot of other reservoirs and dams in the basin as well, and all of those influence the watershed as a whole. And so I know I'm gonna start out by disappointing some people on this call already, but I'm gonna have to limit myself to be talking about the lower river tonight. And that's not to say that the upper river isn't important. There are so many things that we need to talk about there too. It's just that I'm gonna focus on the lower river for this particular talk. So I'm gonna start off by talking about water quality and aquatic invertebrates. And I'm gonna really go back to basics here, probably further back than a lot of people are thinking that I would. And go back to phenology. So this is the timing of recurring biological events. And some of you may have heard this term used in conjunction with talking about climate change and things like bud burst. So when plants start to flower in the spring, that's an example of phenological event. And these events are triggered by typically abiotic factors that are fairly stable over long periods of time. So these are things like temperature and photoperiod or day length. And in river systems, actually, another major cue is flow as well. So those things all can influence the phenology of a system. And if we look closely then at stream temperature and phenology, this is kind of a little cartoon of a theoretical river of water temperature over the course of a year. And you can see how what this figure is trying to convey is that changes to that temperature are going to trigger key life events in the different organisms that live in that basin. And I think what's really important to remember is that this is the organisms are evolved for the specific basin that they live in, right? So even if we're talking about rainbow as a species, the temperature that's cues spawning in a rainbow trout in the Olympic Peninsula is going to be potentially very different than the temperature that cues spawning in a rainbow trout in the Deschutes, right? So that's really important to remember. Another component here when we're thinking about stream temperature is to remember that basically every organism that we are really concerned about in streams is ectothermic. So their internal temperature relies on external temperatures. Their metabolism, their growth, their physiology is completely dependent on their external temperature. Now, for certain animals that are really mobile, like fish, that can move around, rivers have heterogeneous temperature environments. Fish can actually find maybe cooler spots or warmer spots, depending on what they're going through. But obviously, there's going to be some ultimate limits to that as well, right? And so I'm going to start off really by wading right into it and addressing the maybe 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, and that is the selective water withdrawal tower at Pelton Round Butte. So for those who don't know, this is a construction that was put together in 2009, 2010. It came online and started altering the temperature. So instead of being 100% complete bottom draw, as Pelton Round Butte had been for its first 50 years or so, it's now mixing water from the top and the bottom column of the water. So I'm going to go back actually. So this is the data, temperature data from the Madras USGS gauge from the years 55 through 58. So these are years actually before the dam was constructed. And so this gives us the best idea of what the natural river was like, at least the river before the dams were constructed. And so for you, just to kind of put you in the right place, I'm going to show you a number of these temperature graphs. The temperature is in degrees Celsius here, and these are the maximum temperatures for each day. And I've averaged them, so whatever the time period is, I've averaged that that day for 55, 56, 57 for day 2, day 3. And so that's where this graph comes from. And I have day of the year here. It's almost kind of a little bit of a cheat. Dates can be really tricky to deal with when doing data analysis and graphing. So to provide you with a little bit more of a background here to kind of put you in place, the 100th day of the year is about April 10th. The 200th day of the year is July 19th, and the 300th day of the year is October 27th, except in leap years, right, where then it's a day further back. But just to kind of orient you a little bit to that access. So if we look at this, the highest temperature then historically here was about 15.2 degrees Celsius. I'm trying to find a place to put my bar of people where I can see my slides and move them forward. So the highest temperature that would be encountered here is 15.2 degrees Celsius. And if we look at the temperature for May 30th, the temperature would typically be 13.9 degrees Celsius. Now, why am I keying in on May 30th? That's because typically this is when a lot of the omicus, so rainbow and steelhead fry, would be emerging from the gravels. And remember what I was saying about fish being ectothermic and having their metabolism determined by the stream temperature. When it's warm, fish can actually grow faster. So they can eat more, they can metabolize fast. If it's too cold, they actually can't, they can maybe eat, but they'll just, their bellies will just get bigger and bigger. They won't actually be able to metabolize it. They won't be able to turn it into new growth. So this is really a key timing issue here when we're looking at these temperatures. So then this is now, I've added the data from 72 through 81. And you can see that now when we had 100% bottom draw, that the temperature was quite a bit lower. So it's dropped. The highest temperature here is about 14 degrees Celsius. And that May temperature is now much lower. So it's now 10.7 degrees Celsius. So that's a really substantial drop in temperature. And so the importance too of that growth as a fry is that it actually, that life stage is one of the most vulnerable and important life stages in a salmonid's life. So if they're able to grow fast and big quickly, they're going to be dominant in competition. They're going to be less likely to be predated upon. They're going to have a longer life in general. It's a good predictor of lifespan. And that continues then through, it actually builds throughout their entire life. So now I've got this, I divided up the 72 through 81 and 2005 to 2009, because we can see that there's already actually starting to be a little bit of a climate effect here. So where the highest temperature in 72 through 81 was 14, in 2005 to 2009, it's actually closer to 15, right? But you see that spring temperature is still really low. Okay, so now what happens when the SWW comes online is that we see basically a return to a temperature regime much similar to that pre-dam temperature regime. And so, you know, a lot of people think that the SWW was really just built to help passage of smolts downstream for the reintroduction program. But as a river ecologist, this is actually something that we've been pushing for in a lot of dams that are complete bottom draw for many years, because these artificial tailwaters do actually create problems for ecosystems downstream. So we've got in May now a temperature that's much closer to the temperature that it was experienced before the dam was constructed. The highest temperature is actually still about the same as it was before. It's shifted though, the timing has shifted. And remember, we're talking about phenology, that really matters. When the time of the warmest water really matters to a fish's life. So we've got the warmer water kind of back earlier in the year. So now going down to Moody, and so I want to point out here that it is warm for sure. It's always been warm. It's still warm. It's warmer now than it was before. Again, that's probably mostly due to climate. There is probably at least a little bit of a signal from the SWW that there's some warmer temperatures kind of earlier in the spring. But if we look again, so that's kind of the peak migration for steelhead coming in, and that's when we want the temperatures to be cooler. And so, you know, they are still cooling off. That's when the temperatures are pretty much the same. We can also go back and add in temperatures from 55 through 58. And here's where we can really see that there's a difference in climate, right? And part of it is because if you remember it back at Madras for that same time period, the average May 30th temperature was about almost exactly the same as it is for the 2012 through 2021 temperature. But here at the downstream at Moody, the more recent temperatures are substantially higher. earlier in the season. And so what this is probably partly part of what we're seeing here is warmer water further downstream. So we've got a lot of solar radiation going on. And so the waters are warming more downstream than they used to. And this is troubling, and we need to find ways to address this for sure. One of the impacts that's negative that we've been seeing with this change in where the water comes from the lower river is increased periphyton growth, right? So the top of the water does have a lot more algae, has a lot more diatoms in it, and those are causing increased periphyton growth on the rocks downstream. And I think everyone has noticed this. I'm not going to go into details on this, but it's definitely happening, and it's definitely an issue that we want to address. I think that probably a lot of people on this call who are anglers are concerned about what that means for the invertebrate community, right? So, this is looking at the invertebrate community pre-SWW and post-SWW in the fall. And this is the mean density of individuals. So you can see that the density has changed a lot. There's a lot more invertebrates now actually than there was before the SWW. That's not necessarily a good thing. In the spring, there's a little bit more, but that it's not quite as pronounced. And that's probably partly due to more emergence of the insects happening in the spring. And so then they're either as adults or they're laying eggs, or which aren't as obvious in these sorts of samples, or very small juveniles, which also aren't very obvious in these samples. Here, I'm not going to go through every single one of these relative abundance graphs that were published in this study, but I did want to bring a couple that are pretty representative. So in general, what we're seeing is, if we look here, so these are the sites that were sampled along here's the lower Deschutes, and here are the control sites actually above in the Metolius, the upper Deschutes and the Crooked. And then on the y-axis, we've got the percent relative abundance of the community that's made up by these different orders, and then the non-insect taxa. And what we can see here is that there's been really an increase in the non-insect taxa, which is potentially concerning, right? So some of these non-insect taxa can potentially harbor increased parasites. And so that's something that we've seen. This is for the fall. The same general pattern is true for the spring as well. And so this is a big part of our concern here, right? Are the oligochaetes, the worms. This is where a lot of that increase in density is coming from. So in the pre-SWW, there was hardly any oligochaetes in the lower river, and now there's a lot more. So interestingly, there actually has been a little bit of an increase in the control sites as well in density, but not nearly as much, right? So not enough that would explain this boom post SWW. So again, I think that's something that is that's concerning, and that we want to definitely address and take into account. So this is a graph of just showing the, real quickly, I'm not going to talk about the trout populations much, but this was just presented by Mark Shrell last week at the National American Fisheries Society conference. And so he just did an analysis of bull trout abundance in the lower river, and actually found there's a statistically positive trend in bull trout abundance over these years. So that's good to see. Then looking at the red side trout population, this isn't actually the population, it's not densities, right? This is just the mean back calculated growth rates. And the encouraging thing is that we're seeing growth rates that are equivalent to, or maybe even a bit higher than they have been in the past. I know I'm frustrated with the lack of good studies on densities. I think there actually has been a little bit of work done that on that now. But I think other people on this call are probably frustrated with that too, that there hasn't been more follow-up done with the density of red bands in the lower river. So now I want to talk about the steelhead populations. And so I think this is probably what a lot of people on the call are really concerned about. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this. And so I want to ground us too by reminding everyone that mid-Columbia summer steelhead were listed as threatened under ESA in 1999. And so, you know, it's a privilege to be able to fish for these animals and have that connection with these beautiful fish, and to just, you know, keep that in mind, that this is really a wonderful privilege that we have. So to look at the passage of steelhead, summer steelhead over Bonneville, this is starting from 1984. And again, to just kind of provide some background, so some more context for numbers for this year. Over that time period, the average steelhead numbers were 276,500, right? We had some really, really amazing years here in the early aughts. You know, some decent years here. And then what's more troubling though, is that around 2016, especially 2015, things have really taken a nosedive. And, you know, there have been some bad years before, but what's concerning is that this seems to be a little bit of a longer lasting trend than we've seen before. And this is why it's really, I think, something that we're concerned about. And so this slide came from a presentation given by ODFW back in February. So this was their initial, the 98,100 was the initial forecast, pre-run forecast that came out. It was then upgraded to 99,700, which is good. And what we're seeing now is that it seems like it's maybe even going to be a little bit stronger than that, hopefully. But still, you know, in this grander context, you know, we can do better. We want to do better. So looking at wild steelhead escapement estimates over Shears Falls. This is based on counts at the Shears traps, at the trap at Shears. Now, hopefully most of you are aware that those numbers that are published online of the numbers of fish caught in the traps, that's only a small number of the total steelhead passing Shears, right? So they only run the traps for a short period of time each day. They actually end in the evening. And we know that most salmonids move most at night. So they're not really catching that many of the fish. And then a lot of the fish bypass the trap altogether, even when the trap is out. So these estimates are made using an expansion factor. And so, you know, what we can see, and again, so this ends in 2015. I'm sure you'll notice that. So it's really frustrating. I spent quite a bit of time trying to find updated data because, you know, when we go back and look at these numbers for the Bonneville, fish passing Bonneville, remember that drop off, that big drop off we saw really happened around 2016, 2015. So we don't have any data after 2015. It's really frustrating to not see what was happening in the Deschutes during that time period. It's a really critical time period. So hopefully we can get that publicized more. We have had some bad years in the past. In 1995, we had a run that was just slightly bigger than last year's run. And, you know, and we bounced back, you know, look at the early aughts. There's a good recovery. So we're not in a great place right now, but there's hope. These fish are resilient and they can definitely come back if we give them the help that they need. Right. And so to put this into kind of the bigger picture, to give context, the 78 through 2015 average here is 4,875. And so, you know, that's what we want to be shooting for, is numbers up in that level. Sorry. So I do want to talk a little bit about last year. I think that, you know, it weighs heavily on a lot of people. The critical abundance threshold for the Deschutes is 625 wild fish. Last year, there was an estimate of 480 summer steelhead. And a Creel survey revealed there's about 559 wild steelhead, summer steelhead caught in last year's fishery, even though it was really limited. Probably everyone is aware that it ended a year ago today. And so even in that limited time period, astute observers will note that that is the equivalent of every fish getting caught more than once, right? And so if we assume a 5% mortality rate on catch and release, and this is incidental, right? We all do our best with fish handling. We all, you know, try to get these fish to survive and move on. But, you know, it's very likely that 28 fish were killed as a result of that catch and release fishery last year. And so, you know, I say that just to put it in context, because I think that we want to be responsible anglers. We want to care for this resource, right? And so one thing to keep in mind is when you're fishing and what the conditions are like. So this is a graph from a study of summer steelhead caught in the North Fork Trinity River in California. And what they saw here is there's this really big increase in mortality around 20 to 21 degrees Celsius. Now, actually, to put it into some more context, as a biologist, when I've gone and done studies, even when it's a study where I'm not actually really studying the fish, I'm not intending to handle fish, I'm maybe just going to incidentally handle fish, my research will have a requirement that I can't sample at above 18 degrees Celsius, 64 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's true. I've had research permits in Oregon and Washington and BC and Alberta, any place where there's salmonids in the Western US that I'm aware of, that cutoff is 18 degrees Celsius. So, you know, that's something to just keep in mind as you're fishing. And also, so, you know, we did have this horrible high temperatures and drought last year. And so at Moody, the temperatures July 1st were 21.8 degrees Celsius. And to be honest, looking at temperatures after that in July and August were often much higher. And then September 1st was 17.2 degrees Celsius. And so, you know, that estimate, that 5% mortality estimate of catch and release too, that's based, that's independent of temperature. It's not taking into account the potential extra mortality that fish might face from being caught in stressful temperatures. So, you know, to move on, how's this run looking? How's the 2022 looking? Definitely better than last year, for sure. That's good news. It's not as maybe good as we would like, for sure. So here I've got in this bar graph in the gray, this is the preseason projection that's put out. And then this blue color is the status, how many fish have passed Bonneville by the 31st of August. And then that sort of salmon colored bar is then the actual run. Now, obviously for this year, we don't have, we're only partway through. We don't know what the actual run is. But we're doing pretty well against the 10-year average. So by this time of year, about 60 to 70% of steelhead, of official summer steelhead, have passed Bonneville. There's some overlap with other stocks, but you know, we're looking closer to that 10-year average. The wild's looking a little bit anemic, but definitely better than last year again. And so just again, to kind of bring back that context of the 84 through 2021 average being 276,500 fish. And so that average is above actually the y-axis of this chart. So just to kind of, again, put it in perspective, this 10-year average, right? It's a moving average. It's a shifting baseline average. And remember that includes then those last 5 or 6 years of really depleted stocks. So it's a pretty it's a pretty anemic comparison to make. So now I feel like I've given a lot of bad news and really depressing information, but I do see a really positive potential path forward. And so one of the people I have to emphasize and I have to point out is our river steward, Matt Mendez. So he started out basically just doing a lot of like cleanups along the river during the winter, also putting up signs to warn people about where there's active fish spawning and things like that. But, as he's done more work, people have realized that he's really knowledgeable. He's amazingly committed and he's extremely hardworking. And because of that, he's starting to, the tribal fisheries department is kind of getting more excited about having him to help them out. And so last year, he gave a casting clinic and gave away free rods and reels to some tribal youth to kind of bring them to the river and teach them a little bit about the importance of these fish and this ecosystem. And he also led this willow planting day along the river. And he's definitely going to be doing a lot more of this work this next winter. Another thing that we're working on is tributary restoration in key tributaries in the lower river. And here I have to give a shout out to my colleague Tracy Buckner and Women for Wild Fish, and also Sarah Cloud and the DRA for really starting, bringing attention to bake oven and kind of getting this ball really rolling to take a look at Bake Oven Creek. I've been recently talking to Tommy Cianciolo of Trout Unlimited about trying to get some temperature monitors in both Bake Oven and Buck Hollow. And, one of the things that we've been talking about is you can see during the summer here from this photo, there's a real lack of connectivity to the main stem. It dries out a lot. But these streams get really high flows during the winter, right? But they just get blown out. And so one of the things that we're considering doing is if we can get landowner buy-in in at least one of these streams is, sounds like we're getting a little bit of feedback from, okay. So one of the things we're maybe hoping to do, if we can get some landowner buy-in, is to do beaver dam analogs in one of those streams. And for the most part, when people do this, they've seen decreases in water temperature as a result. But sometimes they have seen actually increases. And so we wouldn't want to go all in all at once. We want to do a study to make sure it actually works in this basin, in this landscape. And if it does, then really, yeah, absolutely go all in and commit to it. So I think that has a lot of potential there. We've also started this stakeholder process. Some of the people on this call are part of that stakeholder process. Some others probably know about it. Basically, it's bringing together people with diverse opinions about the lower river to work with PGE and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs to see if we can maybe find some way to change management of the SWW pictured here to improve water quality in the lower river. Now there's a lot of limitations to what can be done because of the FERC license that is in existence at the dam. But I'm still at least hopeful that we can make some changes. And really, I'm really hopeful that this stakeholder group will lead to some more restoration in the upper basin too. So, we need to be tackling some things in the upper Deschutes and in the Crooked River. There's a lot of strides to be made in those places. I think, working with farmers and trying to find ways to help them switch from really inefficient, overhead spraying irrigation to more efficient means of irrigating. There's a lot of gains to be made there. So not only decreasing the amount of water that's pumped out of the rivers, but also then decreasing the overland flow of water that's then coming into the river really warm and full of nutrients. And that will kind of help prevent or improve conditions in Billy Chinook. Now, obviously, there would have to be some pretty significant changes made to really improve those qualities in Billy Chinook. But, you know, I always say too that the best time to work on habitat, to restore habitat was 10 years ago. The next best time is today. So we just need to get after it and get out there and do the work. I know a lot of people are concerned about smallmouth bass predation. The lower Deschutes is one of many streams in Oregon that is facing increases in smallmouth bass abundance and predation. So I started this citizen science project on this SitSci program. You can download this on an app on your phone. And I'm really encouraging people to go out and kill as many smallmouth as they can, measure the water temperature where you fish, measure the gape or the jaw width, the total length of the fish, and take out the stomachs and see what that fish has been eating. Obviously, most concerned about juvenile salmonids, but also concerned about native amphibians or even small mammals, anything you find in their stomachs. That's interesting data, and it makes a strong case for us to argue for stronger management of these invasive species. We'd also like to call for more transparency and communication around hatchery programs and percent hatchery origin spawners in the lower river for both steelhead and spring Chinook. So I haven't been able to find out actually what the average percent hatchery origin spawner is for the lower Deschutes for either steelhead or spring Chinook. But it shouldn't be higher than 10%. That's according to the Pelton Round Butte hatchery management, hatchery genetic management program. So that's something that we need to work on. I think we also want to push for more transparency really too about population monitoring. I would love to know, like, you know, how those expansion factors are calculated to calculate the estimated run size for steelhead. I think we need something that's maybe not like the entire coastal multi-species management plan, but some sort of document that's similar to what that plan ended up producing, so that everyone's on the same page and we all know kind of how things are going and how things are being monitored. And this is the big one. I think we need to remove the dams. This watershed is not going to be resilient to climate change. We're not going to have long-term survival of salmonids in this watershed until we remove the dams. We're starting to approach the planned lifespan of these dams. As they get older, they're going to be more costly to maintain. We're starting to already see some of that happening. Other electricity sources are going to come online that are cheaper and more efficient. And so, you know, this is a big lift and we know it takes a lot of time, and that's why we need to start now. We need to start talking to people, really say, like, this is what we need to do, because it's going to make the lower river more resilient to have these dams removed. And it's going to make then the really amazing habitat that's the most climate resilient above the dam, like the Metolius, actually open it up again to our anadromous salmon. That we need to make sure that this happens. This is the most important thing probably we can do. And I know all of this that I've said sounds like a lot, but I know that all of you really care about this river. I know there's so many people who do. I know that we can do it. And so that's what I have for today, and I'll take your questions.
Awesome. Great presentation, Dr. Liz Perkin. I really appreciate it. We all do. Go ahead and give her a virtual round of applause, everyone. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with questions. If anyone has any burning questions, I'll go ahead and ask you to go ahead and unmute yourself and start your video. Or those of you that don't feel as comfortable to ask the question in person, feel free to type in the chat box. So anyone out there have any questions? Nissa?
Yes, hi. I don't know
Nissa.
if you can see me or not. I can't see myself, so who knows? But
I can see you. I can see you
all
and hear
right.
you.
All right, fantastic. I always have a question. That's kind of my thing. Liz, thank you so much for this presentation. It was really fantastic, and I didn't know it was happening until my friend texted me and said I should tune in. So this has been great. My question is about those beaver analogs. That was the most exciting thing that you talked about that I noticed. I'm a big beaver believer, and I think that we should have beavers redistributed all across the landscape. And so I guess my question is kind of about the potential warming of streams, and sort of a comment that I feel like if more streams had the beaver analogs or had beaver reintroductions, you could sort of statistically eliminate that potential problem by saying, okay, well, we're doing 5 beaver analogs, and okay, maybe one of the streams might raise in temperature, but the other ones probably won't. And so therefore, this is going to be a really great thing for us. And I also understand that it might be sort of a permissions and an access issue, but it's great to hear that, and woo, go Beavers.
Yeah, so so what we've seen actually in other places in kind of east of the Cascades, this has happened a lot where beavers have been reintroduced. And at first there was a lot of hesitation by ranchers and others to reintroduce beaver. But then once a few kind of intrepid souls got into it and reintroduced beaver on their property, they realized that, like, oh, it actually brings up the water table, the entire water table. And so instead of having good grazing just right along the stream in the riparian, you actually end up with this like lush, wonderful meadow that's like really, really wonderful grazing over a much larger area. The concern about the temperature, really, it has to do with the specific location. So what the geology is, and also then too with the past history. And sometimes it just takes more time for it to actually be a cooling effect. So if you don't have much cover and you have a large pool available that's getting a lot of sunshine and gets really hot, so that's more likely to cause an increase in temperature. If you have kind of smaller pools that I've seen in some places like the John Day Basin that then have good willow cover, you end up with a net cooling effect. And so, you know, it's dependent on some of these other factors. And part of the good thing about using beaver dam analogs to start with, to kind of kick things off, is that then you can set up the conditions for willow to grow well without having the consumption by beaver, because beaver can like knock out an entire willow planting in a day. And so if you can kind of get things going with the beaver dam analogs, and then you can hopefully actually get beaver reintroducing and then maintaining it on their own.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. I hadn't really thought about that, the aspect where they would be, you know, eating at the same time, and a potential pool not being able to keep up with the reintroduction. And especially if you have low quality soils or more rocky soils.
Thank you, Nissa. Anyone else have any questions?
Rick Hafley here.
Rick, go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I don't have video. Yeah, Liz, thanks for doing that. I'm impressed that you took this on to cover everything in 20 to 30 minutes. It's a big topic. Yeah. There's a lot there to unpack. And you did a good job covering the key points, I think. But I did want to just jump back a little bit to the water quality issue, because, you know, I think most people know I worked for DEQ for most of my professional career on water quality around the state. And I've done a ton of the biomonitoring work for DEQ as well as for DRA, and the water quality work for DRA. So I'm coming at it from that side of things. But the data we've got on the lower Deschutes, when you look at the pH and the dissolved oxygen problems, there's some as bad as I've seen in Oregon. And so it's really related to the nutrient load that's going into the lower river from Lake Billy Chinook, from the surface water. So I think whenever we're talking about solutions, we really have to look at reducing the surface water withdrawals, because it's really becoming a more eutrophic river. And you've touched on that with the algal growth down there, but that's kind of the symptom that we're seeing. And if you look at the pH levels particularly, they really show significant number of days, the majority of days throughout the spring, summer, and fall are above the pH standard. And they're even getting above 9, which is pretty extreme, even in Oregon, in some of the central Oregon streams. So I just want to make it sure that people understand that the nutrient problem is really something that needs to be looked at. And we all agree that the upper basin needs work, and I don't think anybody would want to see that not happen. But that work will take a long time to create benefits that are going to show up downstream in Lake Billy Chinook and the lower river. So I think we really have to look at how we're managing the tower and surface releases to see some of the positive changes that I think we can make in the lower river. So, but thanks for getting this out there for people to see.
Thanks, Rick. I agree. There's definitely some big water quality issues in the lower river. I think, I try to look from a really holistic perspective, and I think what's been missing, this is part of my frustration. I think it's probably a frustration that you and others in DRA have as well, is having a lack of good monitoring on the trout populations. I think it makes it hard to get that kind of big full picture over time. And also, I know that you're aware of the weaknesses of that Nightingale et al. Work. And I think we need another follow-up study to see what the river's looking like now. And to weigh the benefits of going back to a more natural temperature regime against, again, as you mentioned, the really negative effects of increased nutrients that we're seeing.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Looks like we have one from John, and then I'm going to jump over to the chat box real quick. We have 2 in the chat.
Liz, I'm John Hazel at Deschutes Angler Fly Shop and a 45-year veteran guide on Deschutes River. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm concerned with the data that's used with natural temperature regimes when the data is presented from 1955 to 1958. It could be presented from 1958 to 1972. These are some of the worst water regimes in Oregon's history in the upper basin. So when we think we're going to go back to more natural temperature regimes and we're taking water temperatures based on 1950, we're really way off base on what the natural water regime would be on the Deschutes Basin, where 85% of the water flow is spring water and covered with a beautiful riparian in the upper mid and upper Crooked River Basin and upper Deschutes Basin. So we're really starting our data off with the wrong temperature regime in the worst possible times, and we're trying to emulate that now. And I think it's a very bad way to go. The water quality has never been worse on Deschutes River. The trout have never been in worse condition. Everyone's infected with black spot. And we're basing this all on a more natural temperature regime, which has caused most of the problem in the lower 100 miles. That's all I have.
So John, actually, can I ask you what, what about the 50s made it, I was born in the 80s, so like I don't know why the 50s were the worst possible water temperature, and what data do you have?
The data that I have is I was living in the 50s, Liz, and I've been out in Central Oregon most of my life. Cows have been eating along the riparian basin of the entire Crooked River and Deschutes Basin all throughout the early 1900s. Irrigation was out of control. I mean, these are really the worst of times for riparian on all Oregon rivers. And it's just after they built a railroad up both sides of the Deschutes River, so those are really bad times for the Deschutes River. But my point is we're taking the worst possible times in history, and we're basing an entire natural water temperature regime on that. And it's just a bad place for a starting point.
So,
and we've got warmer water temperatures than the Deschutes can handle environmentally.
So the reason I asked for data is because people's memories aren't always perfect. And because when we look at the models developed to develop these stream temperatures, looking at the land temperatures, the temperatures of the rivers coming in to Billy Chinook, they use a model that is widely accepted throughout Western North America. It accurately models water temperatures everywhere in North America, in Western North America. And so, I guess it's fine if you disagree with I think, there are things that could be done in the lower river. There's definitely issues of water quality, but I need data. I need actual data to be convinced personally.
I get that, Liz, but just look back at the agricultural practices back at the time, and there's no way we're talking about a pristine natural environment in the mid 1950s. So that's what I'm concerned about. That's when the data began to show up, and that's what the data that you're using. But it's a wrong time in history to be to be gauging what the natural water temperature would be on the Deschutes River in 2022.
Thank you guys so much. So I'm going to go ahead and move us on. We still have a lot of questions that need to be answered tonight. So the first one that I had from the chat that I was going to ask you real quick, and I know it was late news today. I want to see if Liz has had time to process it, but what was your perspective on the decision announced today to reduce fishing on the lower Columbia River? Have you had time to look into that, Liz?
I did look at it real quick. Unfortunately, I was kind of distracted prepping for this.
Yeah.
But that's really based on the Thule Chinook that are lower Columbia Chinook, and they're some of the most sensitive. And so that closure is all about protecting the Thule Chinook, and it doesn't really have as much to do with the steelhead. I think that the steelhead will probably get a little bit of benefit from it, because I'm sure there is some bycatch of steelhead in that fishery.
Nice. So I'm going to go, we have another hand up. So Robert Sims, would you like to?
I think I turned my microphone on. Let's see
Yep,
here.
you're good to go.
You're good.
Okay.
Yep.
So just a couple, a question and a comment. I'm unclear as to why the Shears counts can't be statistically adjusted from 2016 forward to estimate escapement of wild fish.
So I don't know the expansion factor they use. And so part of it is you have to also know how many hours, I'm assuming you need to know how many hours the trap is in the water. I don't know that it's the same number of hours each day. I don't know if it actually is in the water every day. There's more.
I understand all
complications.
that. Yeah. So you're saying they haven't made an estimate, the ODFW?
So I don't know. I assume that they've made an estimate. They've actually done that math. But I haven't been able to find it anywhere. So I think it's on the like the recovery tracker website. If you're familiar with that one, I've looked there, and yet this has the same cutoff. It ends at 2015.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
So,
I'm gonna make a spreadsheet of the factor and understanding how it sort of varies by how much time and all that. My other thing is more of a comment. Well, I guess the other thing about the run on the Deschutes is nobody seems to be looking, at least at the moment, at what's going on at that trap. And basically there are no fish there. And it looks worse to me than last year.
It's funny you should mention that, because I've had the same thought looking at the trap, because I've counted, I think we're up to, I think it's like 9 wild, 10 hatchery or something like that.
Yeah.
Not much. It's actually, the count is lower than last year at the same time. Yeah, I don't know.
Just a comment, and then to go backwards, the whole ODFW program, whatever you want to call it, to decide when to allow fishing or not, is based on the Bonneville counts. But there's like this huge Skamania stock that basically don't go over the Dalles Dam. So I haven't emailed Jason Seals, but it's like it seems like sort of a not particularly informative measure.
Yeah. I'm
not trying to put you on the spot, but I realized I just did.
I mean, no, I know what you mean. Because obviously, the Bonneville counts are imperfect for sure. For several
They
reasons.
are earlier, so they're leading indicators, so that's good. But on the other hand, there's a huge reduction in the number of fish getting over the Dalles. Anyway.
Yeah, so I think that's why they're using it, because it is early. It's the earliest they have, right? I meant to do this, but I just didn't have time to do a correlational analysis between the Deschutes run size and the Bonneville to get the wild counts at Bonneville. I just didn't have time to do that before.
No.
To see how well it
actually
aligns.
I meant to begin my whatever this is, that this is great. What you did is great. I hope the slides that you've prepared will be available.
Yeah, and actually, so I meant to say this, I'm a big proponent of open science, not this, those graphs that I made from the temperature data aren't, really science, but I do think that some people haven't been able to easily access that USGS temperature data always. And I think it's because that forward facing website, where you look at the discharge and things, sometimes it gets wonky with more historic data. And sometimes I've noticed that it won't necessarily show data that's actually available. But there's a package that I use through the R statistical language that was written by USGS to pull data from their website. And so all of that's going to be available on my GitHub repository. So people can download the code, they can download the data itself, play around with it.
Great.
I'm not going to send that out. I'm not going to send that out to everyone.
I just hadn't seen the earlier data.
But yeah, if you're curious,
the pre-dam data, the Pelton Round Butte. So that I'd never seen.
Yeah, if anyone wants to have access to that code and that the data and stuff, just send me an email, liz@nativefishsociety.org, and I'll send you a link to the repository and you can just download it.
Thank you.
One comment in the chat box. Is everyone aware of the great BDA project on Bridge Creek of the John Day to increase habitat for juvenile steelhead habitat? Look it up. Liz, I don't know. Do you want to speak to that at all?
I'm not as familiar with the Bridge Creek. I did some some habitat work and like preparation, some preparation assessment on Pine Creek, which is in the John Day. And I saw, it was really, really amazing. The big problem there that you often happen in the John Day watershed is that you get this, you know, crazy erosional forces when you have severe riparian grazing in these small streams. The streams end up down cutting and down cutting and down cutting until in the summertime, they often run dry. They'll actually, like, the water will sub out. So the water will be flowing below the ground. And I did those assessments in, I think 2001. And then I took a class, an ecology class out there in like 2015, I think. And you couldn't see any down cut areas at all anymore. It was all where they put the BDAs in, it was all filled in. And then beavers had naturally taken over from there too. So it's really amazing. There's way more flow, there's way more habitat, there's like lots of juvenile rearing in there. And so all that work is really impressive, and it's very exciting, sort of. And so, you know, like, yeah, we would love to mimic that work in the lower Deschutes.
Awesome. So is there any more burning questions that folks could need to ask? We'll take one more, and then I'm going to go ahead and close it up if there is one.
Hey, this is Mark Metzdorf. Could I make a comment and ask a question?
Yeah.
Hi, Liz. I agree with Rick Hafley that you did a great job of encapsulating all that water quality data in a very brief time. And you also said that you weren't going to address fish numbers to some extent. I think you were talking about perhaps the project at the Pelton Round Butte, and that's my question. I think that the whole project, the reintroduction project and the Pelton Round Butte Tower were created to mitigate the loss of anadromous fish, and it was a condition on which the license was granted. They've been running the project for 13 years now, more than 3 salmonid life cycles, and it's not doing what it was supposed to do, despite many tweaks to the management and attention to the water quality issues and all the science that's been done. And that data is readily available. The smolt counts going downstream, which are the most important factor, are not good. They've never come close to trapping as many smolts as they would like to. And there are virtually no wild native smolts coming from fish that were created, passed downstream, came back, passed upstream, and then spawned in natural tributaries. So we have that data, and I've never seen it, and I've looked at this a lot, as you know. I've never seen it really accumulated in one place to show year on what is happening there. And I think that if we did that and got that news to the public, it would show that the results are not adequate for what was proposed. And that would be, to me, a big component of a campaign to begin to talk about dam removal. I liked your last slide, and so my question is, can we put this data together, perhaps in concert with some of the other NGOs that are on the fish committee to show people that it's not working, because it's not.
So thanks so much, Mark. And I was almost gonna do a shout out to you on that last slide, the dam removal slide, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to be called out like that. But just so people know too, Mark Metzdorf is a dedicated river steward in the lower Deschutes as well, and is extremely knowledgeable about what's going on there. He sat in on a lot of these fish committee meetings. So what he's saying is totally dead on. We should be putting together a that should be easy to put together. I totally agree on every component you said there. I think that I do want to address like one misunderstanding, which is there's an idea that it's like, well, if we know that this reintroduction program isn't working, then we can get rid of the water tower, and we actually can't, because it's still in the FERC license as the water. There's still those water temperature requirements, and so the water tower is there basically, I think, for the life of the dam. And so how I see the route around this is we really need to get rid of the dams. And I think that's a great way to attack it, Mark. By looking at, that's a big part of the license is around reintroduction and making sure fish have access to that habitat up there.
Thanks. I wasn't meaning to imply that the tower could be taken out. I would love to see all that concrete go away at the same time. Probably won't happen in my lifetime, but I'm going to keep working toward it.
I'll be there with you, Mark.
Awesome. Well, I think it's kind of time to call it a close. I wanted to start the closure here by saying, if anyone has any suggestions or thoughts of what we could present in the future or additional information they'd like to know about the Deschutes River, I ask that you put it in the chat box right now or send us an email about it. We'll do our best to answer those questions and go ahead and get you that info next time we have one of these. Maybe we can give an update in the future too. Totally understand we didn't cover the upper Deschutes, so folks that were on the call to hear more about the upper Deschutes, we can possibly do that in the near future, but please stay in touch. I wanted to start by saying, just stay connected to this issue. Look for opportunities to volunteer, work on habitat, get involved with Native Fish Society or other NGOs that are involved in the basin that are working really hard to fix the watershed and fix the basin for a better future for the Deschutes. Please share this presentation. Like I said at the beginning, we recorded it. We're going to post it on our YouTube channel for Native Fish Society. Please share it around with all your friends, family that you might know to help educate them about the great conversations that we had here tonight, about what's currently going on and what they can do to get involved and to help out. It'll also be posted on our website, so you can access it through Native Fish Society website. If you don't have YouTube channel or whatever, you can access it there. And I wanted to finish. If you have any other questions, again, you can email those in to Liz at nativefishsociety.org. But any other questions about Native Fish Society and our work throughout all of the Pacific Northwest, please send us an email at info@nativefishsociety.org. And then just to close everything out, our next Lunch and Learn series, it's going to be an actual lunch. So that'll be at noon on September 22nd. And it include Maria Curvilla, sorry, hard last name. She's the recipient of our NFS Wildfish for All scholarship. And again, that's going to be on September 22nd at 12 p.m. And the presentation will be focused on her studies on the effect of temperature and school size on the collective response of fish to a threat. So that'll be another good one to tune into. So again, thank you all. Thanks to Dr. Liz Perkin for such a wonderful presentation and kind of tackling this very controversial issue, I guess, or just opinionated issue of the Deschutes River Basin and what we can all do to get involved and help out. So with that, thanks everyone. Have a great evening, and we'll see you at the next Lunch and Learn.